Thank you. All right. Hello, everyone. Welcome to another webinar for these times we're in. And appreciate you all joining me here. Today, we're going to take a look at the work of Milton Resnick and how I understand his project, what he's up to, what it's meant to me in my work and in my life. I'd like to start by thanking Jeffrey Dorfman for all the work he has done regarding Milton Resnick. His book, Out of the Picture, was hugely helpful. And I'd like to thank the Milton Resnick and Pat Pasloff Foundation and for doing a wonderful job. If you're ever in New York and we can travel around again, I very much recommend going to the Lower East Side and dropping into the foundation on Eldridge. And also, I'd like to thank the Chime and Read Gallery. They've since moved, but back in the day, they were in Chelsea, and they put together a couple of fabulous retrospective shows of Milton Resnick's work that I'm very grateful for. Milton Resnick isn't as widely known as a lot of the other his peers like de Kooning and Jackson Pollock and those folks. I first learned about his work when I was a young undergraduate at Santa Cruz from a teacher of mine, Patrick Ahern. It was a course in abstraction, and he introduced me to Milton Resnick, and I could only look through the books and the reproductions, but there was something there that really compelled me, and I'm grateful to Patrick as well. And so maybe I'll speak a little about my experience looking at Resnick, and we'll look at some pictures. We've got some books here, and then I've got some photos to share and some things to read and take some questions. So I had the good fortune to go to one of those retrospectives at Chime and Read. It was the first one, and there were these giant there were like abstract expressionist paintings, a lot of gesture, a lot of color. They were huge, I don't know, 15 feet across. Those were some of the early ones. He was very influenced by de Kooning and the gesture, this sort of thing. And then in a room in the back, there was this big painting. It was about 9 feet by 9 feet tall by 8.5 feet wide, something like that, called Wedding. This was I think this is already, he'd started his more mature work, so it wasn't as largely gestural. There were more, a lot of paint. It was a very dense surface. I'll show you an image of it in a moment. And standing in front of that thing just knocked me out. It was like standing in front of a waterfall. That feeling when you're just bathed in the energy of that thing. And it was mesmerizing. It's like every color was there, and it didn't stop moving, and it was just, I got stoned just standing in front of this thing. It was crazy. So here, let me show you some of the pictures of what I'm talking about. This is what's this called? A Question of Seeing. This was from the Chime and Read show, where they put it out in any case. Not everything in here was in the show, but a lot of it was. And you can see some of this sort of thing. it's a lot of kind of intense gestural, kind of messy sort of thing.
Jordan, can you
Yeah.
make that bigger?
Can I make what bigger?
The picture, your picture.
My picture. So in the top right of your screen, you should have something that either says gallery. There's little boxes, and then there's a big box. And one will be gallery view, and one is speaker view. If you tap on speaker view, my box should get big.
Okay.
Try that. Yes? Does that work? Yes? Maybe? Hopefully? You guys all?
Don't worry, I'll figure it out. Keep going.
Okay.
Mm-hmm.
On that. They got some nice details too. Here you can see the nice detail of what the surface looked like up close.
Oh.
So yeah, this one is good. This is called Swan. This is like 10 more. Yeah, maybe 10 feet across, something like that. Big thing. The painting I'm talking about, oh, here, let me show you. Oh, here's a nice detail of Swan. And this is Mound. I'm gonna mention Mound. It's got that split in the book, but I'm gonna mention Mound in what I'm gonna be reading. And this is the painting that I'm mentioning here that I was just telling you about, called Wedding. It's hard to see in this light, you know, I tried taking a picture, it doesn't. I mean, it's a picture of a picture. It was, anyway, I couldn't believe, I was in a gallery, right? So I go up to the gallery desk and I say, excuse me, is that painting for sale? Didn't understand what's going on. They said, oh, no. That is part of the Metropolitan Museum's permanent collection. Oh, most of the work was not for sale. It was part of a permanent collection. But I, of course, never seen it in the Met. You know, most of his work is in major collections, but you just don't see them out there. This is New Bride. All white. Yeah. Here he is. Can you see him? Right there, in front of one of his paintings, back in the day. Young man. He was born in 1917. He passed away in 2004. He was 87, I believe, something like that. Anyway, he was done. He was tired. And I believe he killed himself is what happened there. I got that right. So I would like to read a bit about Milton Resnick from Jeffrey Dorfman's book, Out of the Picture. I believe you can find it used. The binding is not great on any of them.
Hey,
Paperback, hardback, they're all, the glue, it was all in the glue.
Jordan, that other book that you were showing it's just $10 now on Amazon.
Well, there you go. There you
$10.
go. Thanks, Dave. Yeah, and there's, you know, there didn't used to be many. The Foundation put out a nice book, Milton Resnick Paintings, 1937 to 1987. That's a nice one. And you might be able to find this from Contemporary Arts Museum in Houston from the 80s. This is also a beautiful book. Chime and Read has a couple really nice catalogs that are out there. Okay, from Out of the Picture, in the introduction, after I do some reading, we'll look at, I'll show you some images that I took when I went to the foundation, so you'll get a better sense of what the paintings look like up close. The artist, says Milton Resnick, is someone with an overheated brain. Today, and this was written, I think, just a couple years before he died, and this is 2002. Today, at the venerable age of 86, he is one of the few survivors of that generation whose mind and will, forged in the depths of the Depression, splintered by the war, somehow became quixotically addicted to painting, and against all odds succeeded in creating an international stature in the midst of a cultural backwater. Although a man of his time, he remains, as he ever was, a fervent resistor of it. His remove is not due to longevity. The estrangement was noticeable even in his heyday. Art historians may rightly tie him to the abstract expressionists, but his artistic makeup did not provide for a comfortable fit. In retrospect, it was predictable that his painting would reach its apogee only after the decline of abstract expressionism. Its morphosis would appear to dictate that, yet this very fact has been used against him, particularly by those with scores to settle. At the present moment, though, those battles long distant, he has become somewhat of a spectral figure in the art world, not quite forgotten. He is, after all, represented by a major New York gallery, but then not quite real either, because he has, under duress, served as a sort of peripatetic art professor during the middle decades of the last century. There are many artists all across America who, at the mention of his name, eagerly recount the effect he had on them. A representative number of his major works are in the collections of the leading American and Canadian museums, but have paradoxically received precious little exposure. Nowadays, Resnick doesn't move about much anymore. Like an invisible man, he could simply be dismissed as a rumor if he didn't already cast such an improbable shadow over the development of modern art. Can something be said that can't be contradicted? Yes. More oil paint has passed through his hands than those of any artist, living or dead. He is an obstinate man. His paintings a journey seemingly without end. Some of them have weighed 400 pounds or more and have reached 25 feet in span. They betray such an infinitude of incident, yet unity of effect, that one would be hard-pressed to imagine anything left over, either from the picture or the artist. This has fed the separation. Paint wrecks the will. It has its own life, an enigmatic one to be sure, without a physiognomy such as that of a body, yet possessed of a more enduring life than that of the body. The artist's vocation is to be at one with this wayward life, to vibrate in syntony with the laying of color and oil on canvas, as Resnick puts it. The picture has to become stronger than you are. When the picture is the elephant or the wind, you are the straw, then you know how to paint. So the first part of the book, he goes through and lays out some biography and the milieu that Resnick lived in and worked in. The second part of the book are transcriptions of talks that Resnick gave to the New York Studio School in the 70s. And in the fifth talk, I'm going to go to talk number 5 and read some pieces here for you. A few pages. I'll start chronologically because I don't feel very strong mentally. I don't hold on to my ideas for very long. I think I'll begin with something important to me, at any rate, at least something that happened to me. About 25 years ago, one night, it seemed to me I was doing something special, something different. And I got caught up with it and worked half the night. I was thinking something special, something different had come about and had me in its spell. I went to sleep that night, and when I woke up in the morning, I hardly dared to look at what I'd been doing, thinking I must have dreamed it all and probably it was really nothing. You work under lights, and in the daytime it all seems very stupid. So I went and looked, and it seemed to be all right, okay. But I sat for hours thinking of what I'm supposed to do. I'd fallen asleep, thinking I was much too tired to go on working, and if I went on working, I'd lose it. I'd get a better hold of it in the morning, feel stronger. But I looked and looked at it, and it seemed to me there was nothing to do. I spent all morning getting very sad about it all, feeling that something very important happened last night and that now it's there, but I can't find it somehow, so my life is always going to be a kind of failure. I'll never get anywhere. Someone came up the stairs, Ruth Hagemon, and I let her in, and she said, "You look very gloomy." And I explained how I felt, and she said, "Well, I understand why you can't work anymore on that painting." And I said, "Why?" And she said, "You just painted yourself out of your picture." I got very excited by that. I thought that was wonderful and the most important thing anyone ever told me. It seemed to me suddenly that some small thought like that is really very beautiful, that small thoughts are beautiful. Just something so simply said can mean a great deal. So I went around telling people, you know, I did something very important. I painted myself out of my painting. Well, it took somewhere. It got repeated. As a matter of fact, de Kooning said it somehow, and it got it written about. But anyway, I knew that it had a beauty, and it led to many things. Some of the things I can talk about, and others I can never get around to because mentally, I tell you, I can't hold on very long to anything. After that painting, I had a terrible time, no end of trouble. For a long period of time, I was very depressed. I worked very unhappily, and occasionally I did make a good painting, but I thought that I had touched something that I couldn't understand, and I never amount to anything. Through all the pain and struggling of the following years, it seemed something about that painting had helped me do a certain thing. I would call it a suspension of belief. I no longer had trouble not believing in very ordinary things. Of course, I had no trouble believing in very extraordinary things, but it's very hard not to believe in ordinary things. Somehow that painting made it possible. I'll go on now to skip a few pages here. And then I'm going to read for just a few more pages, and then we'll look at some pictures together. In the meantime, I had started a painting. This was in a very large loft where I had started about 10 huge paintings. I had 8 skylights, and I was able to make huge paintings. One of the paintings I had started very early. I was very interested in, but never seemed to get anywhere with. About 3 years went by, and I had become exhausted. Really at the end of my rope almost, and I thought I couldn't last much longer. I had a chronic neck ache from struggling to look up. I had a hard time keeping my head up, and many other things were bothering me. Certainly, one of the things was that I hated everybody. And at the very end, when I thought of giving it all up, suddenly I thought it was good. I knew that I now understood something about it, and I painted it as easily as you can imagine. I just had no trouble painting it, and it became a very important painting. I called it Mound. I don't know why. It depressed me terribly. It made me feel that it took 20 years or so to realize, to get it under me. And the idea that it took me that long upset me no end. I felt that anybody who was any good would have known right away what it took me so long to find out. I sort of blamed everybody else for that. The reason I blamed everybody else was that I felt that they were a bunch of nincompoops, and I've been living trying not to find that out. I simply refused to look upon them as a bunch of nincompoops, although they certainly were. They didn't know anything about anything, really. Just a bunch of yellow dogs, hardly worth bothering with. And yet so many years of my life I had spent with them and tried to be not one, because nobody is really one with anybody else, but I don't know how to say it. I didn't want them out of my life. I didn't know in what way I wanted them to be in my life. It was all mixed up with the world of art, the world we all have to live in. So many complicated social, economic, and political things that I didn't feel I could just cut myself off from geography, people, and everything. I mean, it may go too far. I was beginning to wonder if I wasn't mad. But as an expression of my hatred for everybody, I went off and decided I was no longer an artist and maybe I would do something else. That didn't last long. With Mound, a new experience became very important to me. And the reason that I felt that I should have known it from the first, when I said that I painted myself out, is that it was always there for me to see. That the way a picture works, it's not so much how you put a picture together as how the picture puts you together. I couldn't determine the painting so much as that the painting could do something about my state, my condition, which was much weaker, much more vulnerable than what I could do with paint. So a whole new series of things began to come to mind about what I could really do with paint. What could paint do? I began to discover how little it could do. It could do nothing in terms of changing. In fact, I discovered something very important, that if you change paint from what it is, you destroy something very important about paint. But more important than that is that you don't change. As long as you can change paint, you don't change. For you to change, for paint to do something to you, paint must stay constant. The act, the doing, the taking up of paint and putting it down, the immediate impact upon your psyche or soul that occurs when you do that has so much danger in it. It's such a magical, important act in your life. Why it is so important and how it does act upon you has to be realized. You have to cope with it. You have to make a point of understanding that. Much more important than anything else about art is what happens when you do that and what happens to you. And nobody, of course, talks about that. It's absolutely irrelevant what galleries and critics and people who buy your paintings think. They just don't have any possible idea of what happens to you, and they're really not that interested. As a matter of fact, they hate the idea that anything really happens to you. They want you to be a genius, and that's it. They don't want anything to have happened. They want you to be born and be that special person with that brand on you, genius, and that's it. You have to be wonderful, and that's all there is to it. Then anything you happen to do gets to be part of that wonderful thing that you are. But what is of a great deal of importance to you is, what do you do when you paint? How does it change you? What does it make of you? Because you are certainly not the person who should be painting a painting. None of you are. None of us are. We cannot live without our place in the things, and the place in which we live does not make room for painting. We are doing something contrary to our place and time, and as long as we remain what we are, all we can do is indicate our opinion. In other words, art becomes our opinion about ourselves, our times, our place, and that, of course, is not really painting. Painting has to become what you really are doing and not what you are reacting to outside of it. And to do that, a great deal of changes have to happen to you. The only way I can tell you what the most important change is that the unity, the thing that you say makes the painting work, if you still say things like that, I don't know, but it has to happen to you. You have to become complete in some way, a universe, a complete thing in yourself in order to reach across and breathe some unity upon this thing that you're faced with. Let's look at some pictures, and then we'll open it up for a conversation, questions and answers. So I'm going to do a screen share. Give me a moment here, and I will get that set up. It's in my other, 1 second. Okay, sorry about that. Okay, so this is Milton Resnick. This was on the wall at the foundation when I came to see their inaugural show, I believe it was, of his work when they opened a couple years back. So I started taking photos of the work in there was the first floor. This is about, 6 feet, maybe 5 feet by 5.5, something like that. Here's a detail. And it's hard to get a sense, looking at the images, of their energetic vibe. They hold a great deal of energy. This one's called Winter. And here gives you a sense of the texture, the surface of a painting that we'll see in a moment, and just how densely painted they are. This is about 5 or 6 feet tall. So you see how those are the 3 there in the first floor. I believe those 2 are called Edna, if I got that right. And yeah, at first I kind of, it was like, you know, I came in and there they were, these Milton Resnick paintings that I'd been waiting to see. And at first I looked at them and it was like, oh, they're just paintings on the wall. And then after a few moments, as I settled in with them, it was like I was attuning to them. We were finding each other energetically. And not all of them, but a great many of them started to, they'll be awake for me. Inverness. This is upstairs. This is the second floor. There are 4 floors, and the second floor is always housing. While other shows are changing, the second floor will always be housing Milton Resnick's work, particularly the large one on the right. And I really don't know how to convey um, the the way I experienced these paintings. I certainly didn't experience them the way I normally experience a painting. It wasn't so much that I was looking at an image of anything. It was more like I was experiencing an energy. I don't know how else to explain it. They just had a pulse. Veil of Isis. And there was it was like getting saturated energetically. Um, uh, and the paintings, being in that room with them, they stopped my mind. They just, I don't know how to explain it. They just stopped my mind. This one, this thing, this just blew me away. I don't know, maybe it's about 20 feet across, something like that. And just this big black painting. But I, and they had to bring it in through the, I spoke with Jeffrey Dorfman, he's often there, and they had to cut the floor to bring that painting in because it couldn't go through the stairwell. And so that thing's not moving. When things settle down, you can go see it. I got some details, I think. It was a hopefully better, bigger. And then some close-ups. Elephant. I don't know if you, it was so in the very beginning, there's that quote that Dorfman brings, when the picture is the elephant or the wind, and you are the straw, then you know how to paint. So they also, on the third floor, they preserved his little studio. When he got older and had a hard time making large paintings, he painted in this little room, and they reconstructed it as they did the construction. This was the foundation is where they lived, Resnick and Pavlov, and this was his little studio. So you can kind of peek into this little, all this stuff, stool, tchotchkes. Whoop. And here, so this is one last painting that I took a photograph of. It was just in a little alcove in the first floor, and oh, maybe it's 3.5 feet tall, 3 feet, something like that. And we get a nice close up, all that color. Continent. Here's a quote. Nothing heroic about the changes that shock the culture, but the power to deliver vision, the interplay of things and emptiness is worth talking about. Also, the element of deception and chance disposition of form and light creates discontent. Perhaps there is a greater thing in the power of things to display themselves in ways we cannot recognize. That all things have life and even emptiness. I go by that, explore that. Paint is as much a thing of life, precious and important to me. I wait upon it as servant rather than master. Here is all I know about paint. It limits activity. It gets out of time, stops the clock. It is a heavy wave that wrecks my will. It spreads on canvas in air and carelessly climbs into myself. It is the greatest pain I endure. It sustains an attachment I call art. Yeah. So for me, there is something about Milton Resnick and his work that functions in a way that I just don't usually expect from what I would call painting or art, or it breaks everything open. It goes further. And it's possible. And I mean, it's one thing to look at a great Titian painting. I think of the Pieta that's in Academia in Venice. But this wasn't that long ago. He just passed away not that long ago. And there is the possibility of painting breaking through what he said about he no longer believed in very ordinary things. He was able to believe in very extraordinary things, but he didn't have to believe in ordinary things. He was able to move through this to sense something deeply essential about reality, about who we are. And those paintings, they function that way. I mean, you have to, attune to them, but they're like portals. They're like, and that it's possible for a painting to do that. So that's what I wanted to share. Particularly these days, my goodness, when it's so easy just to get lost in all of the craziness. My God, do I wipe the package? Do I not wipe the package? All right, I'll open it up. If you want to unmute or you want to, there's a lot of chatting going on here. Let me take a look at some chats here and see what we got here. Thank you, Dave. The book is available on Amazon. Please mute. What do you see that is admirable, right? Yeah, right? You can't tell from the images. It looks like just a bunch of thick mud. Yeah, okay, you got a sense of where I'm coming from a little more. Yep, gotcha. Do we have any more? Maybe that was all on the. Would anyone like to unmute and ask me a question?
I wanted to say about when you said you attuned yourself to the painting.
Yeah.
I've had that exact same experience with Corot's here. You walk by the Corot, it's 20 feet away from you. You're like, oh yeah, it's brown soup, 19th century painting, seen it before. Right. If you get close, you pierce, it's like a bubble around the painting. You get within the bubble, it fills your peripheral vision. Suddenly there's all this color there that you couldn't see from a distance, or you didn't pick up on. Right. And then when you're in it, it's like, this is the most amazing thing I've ever seen. This is like, how did I not see this before?
Right.
Yeah.
It takes a willingness. That's right.
Yeah, and I could see it. I could see it even in the close-ups of these Resnicks. You look at it like you see the whole painting at a distance. Yeah, it's a big painting. It's brown.
Right.
But you get up there and it's like, wow, what is all this stuff?
Yeah. And when you,
it's like it protects itself.
Them, it took me some time for my system to adjust, to start to be receptive, to be sensitive, to attune to where am I, to start to. Right, but that takes a willingness, and of course, not everyone is there. And okay, that's the range of human being, but finding it, yeah. Anyone else would like to make a comment or ask a question?
Jordan, this is Dave.
Yeah.
Hey, two questions actually.
Yeah.
Hey, who were Resnick's influences or teachers? And the second question is, where has his work influenced your own work? And maybe you've talked about, but where has, not his writings, but where has his work influenced your own work?
Well, I don't know who Resnick's teachers were. I know that de Kooning was a big influence on him. He was younger than a lot of the other abstract expressionist painters of that time. When World War II arrived, he was young enough to be drafted. So unfortunately, he went abroad and I think really suffered from PTSD in his life. And the other folks were able to stay back in the States. So de Kooning was a big influence, but he really came into his own. And I don't know who his specific teachers were as he studied. In terms of my own experience and how he influenced me, there is certainly something, you know, one of the, let's call them modalities that I explore when I'm painting, from observation, I'm looking at a motif. Well, sometimes when I'm painting a motif, I'm working tonally and it looks more or less like what I'm looking at. You know, it's like, oh, a representational, maybe realist painting of what I'm looking at. But I will also do that kind of dialogue with my perception of the motif, but keep all the paint very close in value or tone. And so it becomes almost like it's a monochromatic painting done from observation of a particular motif. And there's definitely my experience of Resnick and the life force that is in his work that is right in there for me, and has deeply affected not just that modality, but what I think a painting is, how it functions, what its deeper identity is, as an object that is handmade, but is somehow embodies life force, energy that can transmit, that can communicate, that weaves our being, one person to another, through this thing, something like that. So for me, Resnick is like, yeah, that's it. That's right there. I mean, it's like essentially there. That's what it is. Okay.
I felt like, especially when you showed that very early, or it seemed different, the colorful one at the end, at your very end of your thing.
Yeah.
There was a connection really strong between that and later Monet, when his paint got very thick.
Yeah.
And you started seeing like no more translucency or transparency in the paint, but just like stuff buried underneath coming through.
Yes. Yeah. There. Those late Monets are very directly influencing a lot of the abstract expressionist painters, certainly Resnick. Absolutely. Yeah. That shimmer, that.
I have a question. It's Catherine.
Hey,
Can
Catherine.
you speak to the texture, what is going into that paint to make it, I don't even know what the word is, but to make it.
So thick and knotted like that. It's paint.
It's just paint.
It's just paint.
And what
hundreds
tools
of pounds of paint.
What tools are you using to apply the paint?
A brush.
Just a brush.
I believe so.
Yeah. I mean, it's just, it is so alive. It is so organic. And I have seen his work, so
right. You have something to write.
Yeah, but it really just, I mean, I can really relate to your speechlessness.
Yeah. I was at the foundation for a few hours looking at this work, and it was okay. I'd spent a lot of time, and it was time to go on to the next thing, and I tried walking out, and it was really hard to leave the building. The pull. And then I finally got out the door, and I stood on the sidewalk for minutes because the pull of these things, it was like, I don't know. It was like anyway, yeah.
Thank you.
Yeah.
When I look at the texture of those paintings,
Hi, Nancy. Yeah.
hi, how you doing? I think like what I feel like I'm seeing, it's paint, but it's also time.
Yes.
That it's like sediment. It's something that's just
Yes.
accrued over so many sessions of kind of
Yes.
obsessively going over it, and that
Yes.
is one of the
There's
things
an
that makes them
accumulation.
really,
Yes.
really fascinating and moving to me. That
Yeah.
that it is like that attention sustained over that much time.
Yes. Yes. And so there's a kind of a buildup, not just of paint, but there's a buildup of just energy, life force that gets embedded into the material. Anyone else?
Jordan, it's Maria. It's so good
Hi,
to see
Maria.
you. It's so interesting that you even read that that chapter, because from the book, like that's the chapter. That's how Resnick has stayed with me and Mound. And I actually have a painting that I've been working with for 4 years, and I kind of refer to it as Mound in that like it's this thing that I come to. But what I want to speak to is that I think the greatest influence of Resnick in my life and where I see it everywhere is the courage to stay in the not knowing.
Yeah.
And it's a measurement. Like when I face the canvas, is where are the places that I have an agenda that I think where this is going, or where I actually also it's the opposite, where I get drowned by the not knowing, defeated. So there's definitely like an encouragement, like a courage, where to stay with it, even though I don't know.
Yeah.
And when I'm in this review, what I'm realizing is like, and he continuously does it in his paintings, because we look at it and I'm trying to make sense, but he truly dismantles my reasoning and takes me. And he's like, nope. And anything that any name that I try to stick on it, it's like bubble gum. It just doesn't stick. And he really just, I'm done. I'm undone. And it's so beautiful. Thank you for this review.
Yeah, thank you too. A few chats here maybe, we'll take a look. Yeah. Yes, the courage of not knowing. Absolutely. Absolutely. The courage of not knowing.
And can I say one more thing? And
Sure,
the gift of even where we are right now, like I apply that to everything, to my marriage, to my career, to, like all my heartaches. And then now, like we don't know. We don't know. And every moment to moment, we don't know. Is the internet going to fail us? Because everybody's on internet. We don't know. And so is that kind of attitude of courage, but staying with it. So.
Yeah. And so we, we painters, we have the opportunity, or, we're all home. Here we are, and so we can find time to ground into our place and, draw and paint and show up with this not knowing, and it adds up. I mean, it's real, that's important to know. It's not just philosophy. Well, okay. We're about there, I guess. Yeah. And thank you all for being here and joining me with this talk. I will be, it's recorded, so I will post it in the next few days. Next week, I'll try to put together another talk. I'm not sure, maybe Monet. It's interesting, Dave, that you mentioned late Monet. Also, there's maybe Andrew Forge. There's an essay that I'd like to take a look at, although it might be a little dense in this format, but maybe. So I'm trying to figure that out. Those of you that have made donations, thank you very much. It means a huge amount for me. It really is helpful. And if you would like to donate, please feel free. And if the landing page is already closed, next week you can go ahead and give a donation. I also have some online classes if you're interested in. You can take a look at the website, a foundations course and a modern master's course, and I'm painting, doing my own work as well. So stay well, everybody. Stay well. Take care of yourselves. Keep the faith. And send me, drop me an email, say hi, whatever you're up to. And I look forward to being in touch and continuing. Okay. Thank you.
Bye.
Bye-bye, everyone.
Bye. Thank
Bye-bye.
you.
Bye.
Bye.